So I'd like to introduce Bronwyn. Bronwyn Hall McLoughlin is a founder and managing director of People, Planet and Change. She brings over 3 decades of dynamic leadership in startups, human capital, change management and transformational initiatives worldwide. Bronwyn has recently pivoted her business towards sustainability. She's worked with a diverse range of global companies, including the likes of General Electric, Cisco, Deloitte, Chartered Accountants Ireland, as well as the public sector nonprofits and early startups. She is a former Ireland chapter lead for change management and now the global board member of the Change Management Institute. So good morning and sorry, good afternoon, should I say, and welcome, Bronwyn.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be here. Really excited to be talking about this interaction between project management and change management. So today I'm not going to spend everybody's lunch hour going through a load of slides. We're going to keep it short and sweet. So what we'll cover off today is, first of all, we'll just talk a little bit about the context that you're working in terms of changes in engineering. You're the experts in this area, so I'm not going to dwell on that. But just to kind of set some context, we'll talk about project and change management, the similarities and some of the differences, and where we've got that overlap. We'll talk a little bit about what a change management roadmap might look like, some changes across the profession, perhaps where we're going, and then we'll look at an example about what change management in sustainability might look like as well. Hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end, but I am keen on making sure that there's an opportunity for everybody to interact as we go through the session. So what I would like to encourage you to do is use the chat for any observations, comments that you'd like to make as we're going through. And first of all, it'd be great, like just as a starting point, maybe popping into the chat where you're calling in from today. If you're in the office or if you're in some part of Ireland, let us know where you are, and we'll get kicked off. The second thing, just to make a clear distinction here, in terms of questions, Brian's going to be our moderator for today. So if you should see two boxes on your screen, one is the chat. Please pop in the chat where you're based, and as I said earlier, and then the second is the Q&A box, which I think, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, you'll find under the More button on your panel there. So just let's help Brian out in terms of moderating the questions.
Yeah, I think it depends. Yeah, it depends on your setup, but I can see a Q&A here on mine right at the bottom, so it's easy enough to find. Yeah.
Great, brilliant. All right, so we're already seeing a lot of people working from home today, which is great, but keep it coming. Let us know where you are, and we'll get underway. So first up, Maureen, I wonder if you wouldn't mind just launching that poll for me at this point. What we'd like to understand first up is what's your experience level with change management? And then secondly, in the chat, just pop in one typical people challenge you experience on projects. So we'll give this like a minute or so just to get your insights, your experience level with change management, and secondly, one typical people challenge you experience on projects. So while you're doing that, I'm just looking at all these great locations people are in today. By the way, I'm in Castle Bellingham, halfway between Dundalk and Drogheda, looking out over some gorgeous farm fields right now. And just waiting to see a few of your responses coming through on people challenges. I think the data on our screen around the polls looking pretty clear. So we'll give it another perhaps 30 seconds or so while you keep popping in some of the challenges and your locations in the chat. All right, that's looking good. Okay, that's really great. So you can keep popping those comments into the chat. We might just end the poll there. And so what we're seeing there is around about 64% of you have some experience in change management, 18% very experienced, and then 19% of you have no experience at all. So we'll try and pitch it towards the middle there. And you're certainly welcome to ask any questions as we go through. Brian, if you see anything that you think is relevant for this kind of topic we're talking on right at the moment, then please do feel free to put those questions forward for us.
Certainly will do.
All right, great. So let's get moving. So project management and change management, very much are team sports. So, and we know that the pace of change is, it's just continuing to accelerate every single day. There was certainly around COVID time, there was a lot of talk about change fatigue, but I don't think that there is that kind of sentiment has gone away across most of our organizations. We're still moving at a rapid pace. There's a lot happening in our businesses. And I took the benefit of using AI, in fact, to tell me a little bit about what was happening in the engineering profession. And so what we can see is things like digitalization, Internet of Things, AI, obviously, robotics, sustainability and green engineering, autonomous systems, advanced materials, urbanization, cybersecurity, collaborative engineering are all things that hopefully all of you are getting involved in some way with your organizations. But it's not just about that technology and the products that is in our focus of change. All of the solutions that we need to be able to put in place have a people component. And that's really where the change management focus comes in. So just in case anybody came to this thinking that we're talking about change control today, that is not our focus. What we are talking about is the people side of change and how we might bring people on the journey with us. And in particular, what is the role of change management in helping us to do that? So change management comprises the processes, tools and techniques used to manage the people side of change and achieve the desired business outcomes. Change management focuses on how to help people embrace, adopt and utilize a change in their day-to-day. So again, I don't need to highlight to you what it is that you do as project managers. But what I want to do is contrast this, I suppose, to the role of the change practitioner. So very much on the project management side, I mean, we're looking at our traditional elements around project definition, building kind of leading the building of the technical solution, time, quality, scope, and budget management, our resources, project reporting, and then handing over our projects. So from a change perspective, how does that fit within the project context? Well, the change management focus is really about changing behaviours at an individual level. It's about changing the way we work at an organisation and culture level. We're looking at what is the impact of our projects on individuals and the organisation. We're looking at the readiness of people to be able to adopt the changes that we're trying to drive through. We're communicating and selling the change. We're coaching leaders and champions. I think we're all familiar with the training and skill building, but importantly, we're also making sure that change sticks. And I think that's one of the areas where often change management, I guess, has perhaps sometimes had a bad reputation in that we are not focusing enough on what happens after the change goes live. We're just getting ourselves to the date when our project goes live, and we're not really thinking enough about how, once we get to go live, how do we make sure that change is going to stick beyond that point. I think the other really important point to highlight here is that change management isn't dependent on having a project running. So we may be looking at things like strategy change, cultural change, And in that sense, it may be something, change management may be something that is supporting your ongoing business activities. Okay, so while a project is typically bound by that time and scope element, change management may also support ongoing business activities. But I think it's really important to recognize that we have this communal space between us. And those elements around project governance, project planning, benefits realization and measuring progress and success are common to both of those elements around project and change. And in particular, I want to highlight these two elements in the middle. So project team dynamics. I kind of equate this to thinking about if our project team is not working effectively as a team, we are unable to effectively help the business to realize the benefits. And so working with a change practitioner or really focusing on that project team dynamics is kind of like when you're on the plane, you've got to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help somebody else. Because if your team's not functioning effectively, you can't help the rest of the business. And so this is a really important aspect of that change management as we're thinking about people effectiveness of projects. And then obviously stakeholder engagement, you know, we all know what's involved there, but we'll explore that a little bit further through the session. All right, just having a quick look at the comments there. Great.
Yeah, not too many actual questions. A few, just some comments. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Something around retaining staff. Yeah, I mean, it's and people sort of looking to work locally, maybe from Ian there.
All right, well, we'll come back and pick those up, I think, when we get a little bit further through the session. Perfect. So our change management journey obviously sits alongside our project management processes. So typically from you know, I recognize that there's a lot of different project management models, frameworks, etc. that we use, right? But for the purposes of this, I've just simplified it down: design, develop, test, and deliver. So as a change practitioner, what are we doing alongside of our project teams to make sure that people are coming along the journey with us? So first of all, while you're designing solutions, what we're doing from a change management perspective is really starting to think about what is that desired state in the future. So we're looking at creating a vision that's really going to inspire people, to help them understand what this is going to look like at the end of the change journey. Collectively, with our project managers, we'll be exploring the benefits that we expect to realize as a result of our projects. We'll be looking at stakeholders. So not only the people who are going to be directly impacted by the changes, but also who are those people that we need to have along supporting us. So these might be the folks in, say, finance, HR, IT, who are not only working on the project, but they've got another day job that they've got going on. But we really need a chunk of their time to be able to stand up this project and support it. So, so we're looking at both impacted people who will receive the solution, but also who do we need to be supporting us as a team. We'll be looking at planning our roadmap. What are our deliverables? And we'll talk a bit more about deliverables in a second. And then the other key element for change practitioners as well in this very early phase of the project is really understanding what else is happening across our organisation that might be impacting the people that we've identified up here. I'm sure all of you have seen some kind of project portfolio, and we'd be looking at it from the same perspective, but really looking at it from a people perspective. So which teams are experiencing a lot of change? Which teams are experiencing a lot of change in the same month or the same arena? So this is a really, really important part of ensuring that the business, or those parts of the business that are experiencing the change, are going to be ready. Because as we know, there's only so much capacity that we have as humans to be able to take on change at any one point in time. So that context analysis is really important to understand whether or not our project is really going to be successful, in terms of making sure that people have the mental space to be able to take on more changes. And then we'll also be looking at the people impacts of projects. So we'll be looking at what are the desired behaviors that we'd like to achieve, what are the systems, the processes, and the physical elements that we might need to change within our business to realize the benefits that we're trying to deliver. So when we're talking about systems, we might be thinking around things like our incentive systems. We might be thinking about the KPIs we measure. We might be thinking about the organization systems, how functions work together. So there's quite a lot there in terms of thinking about the impacts. So that's what we do in defining the change. So if we move on then to the kind of that next phase that might be considered in parallel with the development phase of a project, what we're looking at here is how are we going to create awareness and engagement about the solution that we're putting into place. Now, obviously, the thing that jumps to everybody's mind here is around communications. But it's really important that we remember that this needs to be two-way communications, and that there's a lot of channels now available to us to be able to do that. So things like utilizing our internal social media channels, video is huge for our current millennials and Gen Zs. So it's really important that we're looking at a range of different communications beyond just pushing things out through emails. Capability, so we're looking at, what training do we need to deliver? Maybe it's resource kits, tool kits. It could be, flags or signage that people need to be able to point them to the right types of behaviors that we're looking for. In this space, we'll also be looking at how could we potentially co-design solutions. So, I think this one in particular is one that often doesn't get enough attention in I say, less mature organizations around change management. We sometimes think that the solutions are all going to come from the project team because that's where all the geniuses have been assigned to. They're in the project team. All our subject matter experts. But actually, there's always an opportunity to bring in people who are, utilizing these the existing processes, maybe have an opinion on how some of these things could be working in the future. And that element around being able to get comfortable with co-designing with people perhaps outside that SME group, is a skill that still a lot of us need to perhaps develop further. And the reason that this is really important is because it gives us an opportunity to engage people much earlier in the project. So often, I think we've probably all been on those type of projects where a lot of this activity around designing the solution happens in a bit of a black box with, and then people are only really seeing that as they come up to go live. And then that's when we start hearing a lot of the resistance, right? I don't think this is the right solution. I don't think that we should approach it this way. This isn't going to work. And one of the really easy ways to be able to kind of head off some of that resistance, as we call it, is really encouraging people to get into sessions and help co-design the solutions really early. It's about making sure that we're hearing their voices and then heading off some of that resistance a little bit later. The other one I just want to kind of pick up on here is this piece around support. you know, it is, I don't think we pay enough attention in projects around the well-being, both of the project team, but also the recipients of the change as we're going through change. So there's also an aspect here around encouraging, you know, one, good team dynamics on our project teams, but secondly, also to make sure that, you know, going back to our portfolio review, that we are not pushing change at a pace that is going to break people, right? I mean, we know that projects can be a real challenge in terms of, you know, people perhaps could leave our organization because they're not comfortable with the pace of change, right? So this piece around well-being is something that we need to start including more into our projects to make sure that we're looking after both the team on the project, but also those recipients. And I think the other element here is really around creating a community. So look, we've all had those projects, right, where we get our change champions, and you've been voluntold that you're the champion on your department for a particular project. And so often what happens in those situations is that we look at those champions or those change advocates as people that are just on the project for the period that the project is live. But actually there's a real opportunity here to be able to utilize those advocates as a community ongoing past the project life cycle. And building that sense of community amongst those advocates is something that I don't see happening enough on a lot of projects. So let's take, say, an ERP implementation that we're doing. We just designate people as being super users. And then once we get to go live, we never ever bring those super users back together again. It might be the same with your, say, your green team if you're doing a sustainability project, that we don't kind of really bring those people together, give them that sense of being part of a community, helping them to learn from each other, support each other. And the other reason that that kind of community is really important is that they act as the buffer to the project team. So the more support that we can give that group of advocates and build that sense of community and sharing knowledge, the less pressure gets put on the project team to be answering all of the questions, right? We need to really build up that capability within the community and also ensure that that support community can continue beyond the project life cycle. So if we then move on to that kind of middle phase where as a group of, we're looking at testing our solution, but we're doing the same thing from a change management perspective. So we're thinking about how do we, all of these solutions that we're putting into place, the training, the resources, the nudges, the communities, we need to constantly test and learn in this space as well, just as we would with the technical solution. So which parts of the community are working well? Are the nudges or the recognition programs that we're putting in place, are they continuing to work in the way that we intend them to do? Feedback's essential. So, and that's coupled with things like readiness and analytics, right? We need constant feedback throughout the project to make sure that we are hearing some of the objections and the challenges as we're going through, because we don't want to be dealing with those at go live. And so having regular checkpoints where we're potentially running workshops or running surveys with folks to get their feedback. Again, social media is brilliant for this, right? Getting questions out into our social channels within the business to get feedback from people around kind of key questions that they've got. And really listening to what people are saying. I think this is another key area for our projects is being able to listen and to respond through the projects, to be able to make sure we're adjusting as necessary. And then the other kind of element that's very much tied to this is planning and dealing with the human dynamics, right? Unfortunately, we're humans, we all have emotions, and we all kind of bring some of that, whether it's baggage or joy to the projects, but we need to recognize that that is always going to be part of the projects, and we need to make sure that we're dealing with, you know, some of that resistance as we're going through. Part of the way in which we deal with that is by equipping our leaders and coaches to be able to manage that on our projects. And so, because it's not that we expect the project leads or our change practitioners to be dealing with every question. We really need, again, those people out in the business who can help and support those people being directly impacted by the changes. So that may mean putting together toolkits for our leaders around kind of how to deal with questions. It might be about bringing them up the capability curve in terms of their own experience on change management. But that piece is really, really critical in terms of bringing the leaders along. And then again, getting that balance right between our community, who may be more, maybe less experienced, but key contact points within the business. But our leaders are the folks that are, you know, ultimately responsible for making sure that change is going to land effectively within their teams. And we need to make sure that they're really well equipped to be able to deal with those changes. And then finally, the last piece that we're really looking at, and, you know, if we equate this to kind of the project management area around delivering, we need to not only, as I said earlier, get to the point of go live, but we also need to make sure that the changes we're putting in place are going to stick beyond go live. And so what we're looking at are potentially things like changes to the organization structure. Do we need to potentially introduce new roles? Do we need to realign our organization for some of the new behaviors that we are looking for from employees? Perhaps we need to rewrite job descriptions, the measurements that we are measuring people against. We're looking at things like existing or new performance measures. So maybe we need to put in place new audits or new ways in which we drive continuous improvement. But all of these are key aspects of the way our organization functions on a day-to-day basis that we need to be thinking about as we're building our projects and building the solutions to make sure that what we build is going to be embedded into the business. And then I can't highlight enough the importance of doing retrospectives at the end of projects. I know many of you will already be doing that, but it is a key learning for us. Again, it's about engaging people and recognizing that maybe everything didn't go perfectly, but giving people that chance to voice it, and then maybe think about how do we get to kind of close the door on what worked, what didn't work, and then be able to move forward in a really positive way from the project. So that's kind of our the key elements of our change management journey. I just want to highlight here, and I don't want to go into this in any great detail, but I think it's important to recognize kind of where we've come from a change management journey and why we've come along that journey. So first up, you know, going back in the kind of 50s and 60s, change management profession was kind of really bedded into what was really a focus around psychology at that point. And the reason I'm highlighting this is because actually elements of this still exist in the work that we do today, right? So what we're looking at is, you know, what are the forces that really help us to propel projects forward from a people perspective, but also recognizing that there are some aspects of our business that may be holding us back, right? So that might be the way we make decisions. It might be certain ways in which we're structured. It might be, you know, it might be perhaps partners that we're working with. So that element around looking at what are the driving and resisting forces within our business and how does that impact on the people aspects is something that we still need to be thinking about. Kubler-Ross change curve is something that, you know, I'm sure many of you have come across. And often this is, you know, I suppose, kind of just poo-pooed, I suppose, by some people saying, well, this doesn't really have any relevance. But I think it is important to recognize that this is the emotional curve, right? So this may not be everybody's journey through a project, but it does highlight the fact that people go through emotions on a project that we need to deal with, right? And we also don't necessarily go through them in a linear way. So today I might be really happy with where my project's at and the impact that I think it's going to have on me and my role. But as we move through the project, as all of us know, we have new information that emerges all the time. And so this is why it's really important that we are continually checking in with people being impacted by the change to see where they are on that change journey. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice today. One of the other early models around change management was Cotter. I think, again, elements of this we still see in a lot of the change models today. So building that guiding coalition and the volunteer army. So these are the people that are really going to be advocates for the change for us in the business, and making sure that we're creating those communities of influencers across the organization. So then in the early 2000s, I would say, is really when change management as a profession kind of came forward as an entity in its own right. Many of you might be aware of Prosky's ADKAR model, which is very much based on kind of individual behavior change. So looking at creating awareness once they have that they have a desire to change. We're then building knowledge, skills, and reinforcing the change. But I think the part that's really most interesting at the moment is how the change profession is moving forward. I'm not going to talk about Agile because I know many of you will already be well aware of what Agile is, but just to say that there are Agile change practices that align very much with project management. But we're really now focusing a lot on behavioral science. And I think some of this, while a lot of these models here are particularly focused on changing behavior at massive scale in the public domain. So both of these models really emerged out of things like the Behavioural Insights Unit in the UK, which is one of the leading authorities in this space. But what also underpins some of this is some of the behavioural science that we use from a digital perspective. So if you think about kind of this time frame, the kind of 2010s through the 2020s, this is really when we started to see the implementation of a lot of apps, right, on our smartphones. And so the way that those apps have been designed is really around how do you drive certain behavior online to be able to deliver the results that you're looking for. And so this is really the kind of public version of what our app designers have been doing in the same time frame. So over this kind of period since the 2010s, we're getting this real parallel now between focusing on behavioral science, but at the same time using the digital tools that we've got emerging to drive behavior change in a whole new way. And so I think as we move forward, what we're going to start to see is both convergence and divergence. So I think as project managers, we're going to start to see the convergence of project managers being expected to do some of the change activities, right? I know that there are people out there today who are hiring project managers that understand the change components of it, right? It's not just about building a technical solution moving forward. But we're also going to start to see this divergence, I think, between people that have a really good understanding about how to drive behavior with a digital tool, but also then how do we start putting that real human lens on it, right? So that we are not just thinking about the digital solution, but what does that mean from a human behavior perspective? So So the things that are really going to start emerging and impacting the way in which we both deliver project management and change management are our digital adoption platforms, right? So typically we're only seeing this at the moment with the big solutions like ERPs, but I would imagine as we start to move forward with things like digital twins or other technologies, that digital adoption platforms will become much more part and parcel of what it is that we're doing with technology. AI, I mean, it's obviously having huge impacts across the whole profession, but we'll start to see things like virtual reality and augmented reality. So augmented reality being, using our smartphones, let's say, to try on a pair of trainers or to see what our new haircut might look like. Whereas virtual reality, we've got the goggles on, we're immersed in what this new world's going to look like, and we're able to test it out. We don't see a lot of that right now in a lot of the projects that we're working on. So hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of that come forward. And then I think the other key area that we'll start seeing a lot more of in this space is personalization. So being able to recognize with the benefit of AI and analytics to be able to say, okay, this particular person, they do this job and these are going to be the specific impacts for their role. That means I need to communicate something that is unique for that individual. Because if you think about the way we communicate today, we communicate in cohorts, right? So all of operations perhaps might get the same message or the same change experience, or everybody in sales and marketing, or maybe even small groups in sales and marketing, etc. But I think as we move forward with AI, these other tools and analytics, we should be able to get down to that point where we're able to see a very personalized experience of change management. So just I want to highlight here that there is no right way to do change management, right? I know that there will be some organizations that are out there selling you a model or a particular approach. But in terms of frameworks, there really isn't a right way. I think the most important thing that as a project, you've agreed what's the right way to approach it. So just in summary, successful change management, we need people. Projects are dependent on people to realize the benefits, right? They're the ones developing the solution, coming up with the ideas, realizing the benefits. And they're also going to be the ones that are resisting it, right? If they don't agree with it. So it's really important that as we're building a project plan, set that element around change and thinking about what's the behavior and the mindset that we want to shift at the end of the project. We've kind of talked about readiness. We've talked about emotions. Individual and system change has to go hand in hand, right? We can't do one without the other. Context matters. We need to understand like what else is going on in this person or this team's life when we're leading change, because whatever change you're driving, it's not the only thing that person's dealing with. So we need to understand that broader context. And then obviously leadership support is critical. So I think we're probably coming up to the end of time, and I want to leave a little bit more time for questions. So I'm just going to leave this up on screen, but just to say, look, sustainability is one area that we're all going to be dealing with over the next, future, basically. It is part of all of our future, and we're going to have to all kind of get on board with it. But I think just if you're working in this space, don't forget that there is really a human element here, right? A lot of folks, I think, are thinking about what's happening in this area at the moment around things like ESG reporting or building a basic sustainability plan. But this really has a huge human element behind it that we need to recognize. And so I'm just going to leave this up on the screen, and then we'll kind of deal with some of the questions that are coming through. Brian, what have we got in terms of questions?
Very good. Thank you, Bronwyn. That was excellent. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Well, we've got a couple of, we've got Horik mentioning a people challenge. and it's basically the syndrome of this is the way it's done, and why should we do it any other way? I mean, so I suppose we've all come across that in all walks of life. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be the starting point. I suppose that when you're looking to plan the change.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the reasons why the sooner we engage people in the change, the
Yeah.
quicker that we can get past this phase of this is what the way that we've always done it. And well, I think one of the tricks to that is to understand why has it always been done this way? What works for them about what they're doing today, but also
Yes.
then getting them to explore what's not working about what they do today and how could it be better. And again,
Yes.
starting those conversations really early is a really good way of unblocking that resistance to this is the way that we've always done it.
Interesting, because I had a situation managing a business there a fair few years ago where we basically I kind of arrived into the business, and there was a lot of change happening, and there was a couple of people in there who kind of had these kind of habits, and that was their way. Why should we change? And I like we demonstrated to them that actually things can be better, and this is a better way of doing things. And it kind of took a while to kind of seep in there, but once a few people got engaged, then everybody saw the benefit of it, and then everybody got engaged with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
think that piece,
Yeah.
Brian, as you're saying about like once a couple of people have seen the benefits of it, right? And this is I think one of the really big opportunities that we have from a change perspective, right? And perhaps a shift that we also need to make as well. You know, we often, as I mentioned earlier, we have people who are voluntold that they need to be getting involved with this change and being subject matter experts. But I think with this kind of network analysis that we've got capacity to do now, right? We have the ability to understand more from our employees around who are the people that they trust within the organization. And you can use that either doing some very simple surveys, or there's some brilliant organization network analysis tools that are now available.
Right.
But identifying those people who are really the trusted influencers in your business and getting to them
Yes.
first,
Yes.
right? Nobody wants the guy on the project who's like, he's on the project because nobody wants to work with him, or because maybe he's a
Yes.
brainiac of the department, but can't
Yeah.
communicate to save his life, right? So we need to be thinking about like who are those potential early adopters and influencers.
And interesting you say that, because my background of kind of moving from engineering and then into kind of the corporate scene over the last few years, and being involved in some big change projects. Um, I also noticed that on the training side of things, that the some of these methodologies are starting to bring in that change element into it. And you mentioned key influencers there, because I know that Prince 2, a new version of Prince 2 has just arrived on the scene a few months ago, and they actually have they have a section on managing the people, including key influencers who are all about embedding the change that has been sort of delivered, I suppose, on the back of projects. So that's an interesting thing. It's sort of a dynamic that seems to be happening there. That certainly the two kind of the two disciplines are coming closer together.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Um, okay. Just moving on with the questions then. Ray says. Relearning at the end of the project, then yeah, unfortunately never found it worked well, if at all, with the best of the world in the world. Next project is a change, new designers, new construction staff, all focus on delivering product project, all under pressure to deliver. Looking back is never high on the team's agenda, particularly in the private sector. Any tips to avoid that repeat cycle of mistakes?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is like you've got to document what happens in your retrospective and understand what worked and what didn't work. And circulate that. And I think also make sure that if you're in the project management office, that you know the next project is making sure that they're getting copies of those, that you're keeping all of those retrospectives in a place that can be searchable. And I think the other element is around, you know, making sure that your governance committee if you've got a common governance committee across multiple projects, that they're also getting a copy of that retrospective, because they're the ones that, you know, are supposed to be holding us to account about how we're working and what we're delivering. And they need to be aware of what worked and what didn't work, and so that they can hopefully coach back as well. I think on your project team, you've got to be sharing those retrospectives with other project managers. So hopefully maybe you've got multiple project managers sharing that information across the group. And then the other thing, and I know Declan's on the call today, but for me, this is also this piece around documenting the retrospective is critical in terms of AI being able to learn about what works and what doesn't work in our businesses, right? If we don't document it, then AI, when we are able to kind of look at a number of projects collectively, we should be able to get to that point in the near future to say, okay, here's 15 retrospectives for our organization. Tell me, what are the common issues that we're not getting right? What are the things that we do get right? What recommendations would you change, right? So I think that piece around, while maybe may not be immediately apparent about how best to use the retrospective, think about it in terms of, now we've got this superpower in AI who that can help us in terms of looking quickly across that, help us identify, you know, common risks, common successes, common challenges, and what we've put into place to try and address that.
Very good. Very good. Just moving on then, anonymous, then just a call for a message there from somebody asking about beneficials, the beneficent, how change management could be beneficial to their career. You know, you say that you're not a project manager yet, but I mean, I suppose you don't need to be a project manager to get on and learn about change management.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, you can, as a manager, or as a, you know, you could be an influencer in the business, and
exactly.
so I think it's about what your role is today. How can you potentially have an impact, and putting that in context. I mean, I think there's lots of ways in which you can adopt change management principles as an individual contributor in a business or as a manager. So yeah, I mean, like, and I think it depends on what is it that motivates you as an individual, right? I mean, if the people side of projects is what really motivates you, then you don't need to be a project manager first. You can certainly go straight into the change field. And, you know, I'm just going to give a plug for the Change Management Institute while I'm here, seeing as I'm a board member.
Absolutely.
But, you know, we that's part of what we do is give people pathways into the change field. So just something to think about there.
Just on that, then,
make
for
some of
me,
those career choices.
yeah, sorry, Bronwyn. Just to say, for me, I would see fundamentally change management as a more people focused. Maybe if you're following a career, maybe it's a more people focused career. You know, that's just my perspective of it. Than say project management is a little bit more technical, process, procedure kind of stuff. If you like that sort of thing, obviously there's an interaction there, but if for that, just for that person there about, you know, how do you, you know, career development, if you think you're more a people person and want to get involved in that, and that sort of floats your boat, maybe you could drift towards change management as opposed to project management. Yeah. Okay. Just to move on here, keep it moving. Again, we have the question about, I've been doing it for 20 years, so why should I change now? And I just mentioned something briefly about I was on a hot desking project in a very large financial services um, company there about 10 years ago now. And what they did was they were afraid of people leaving the organization. So they first of all, they got a communications expert in, and secondly, they started to post these big images up on the walls of what their new office was going to look like, and it looked fantastic. And this was rolled out, you know, a year before the first project started. So this was all kind of embedding it, if you like, and getting people to kind of talk about it. They also had a forum set up where people could air their grievances, and senior managers would be there to support them. Have you anything else on that before we move on?
No, but
I
look, I
think we've
think that
tackled
there's
it
a
anyway.
lot of different tactics that you can use, and it's very context sensitive, I suppose, in terms of why you do something differently. But you know, to your point there,
Right,
Brian, I think talking about what does this kind of new future look like, I think is one way to help people along the journey. I love what you've referenced there in terms of images. I think the second thing could be you know, developing prototypes can help people, whether that's, you know, a prototype process or a prototype product or service, etc. There's a great example from Singapore Passport Office where they just like set up some boxes in a room that showed how they might move customers or citizens through the passport office in a different way with this new process. And actually, that really helped to help some people connect with what this new thing might look like.
right.
Um, so there's lots of different kind of tactics like that that you can use to get people to buy into it. But again, I think it's, you know, going back to the very beginning of the change, getting them to highlight you know, what we see as some of the benefits, but also like people's own experience. Like what is it that's so great about what they've done for the last 20 years, and but also
Yes.
like what are their pain points, right? What are their
Yeah,
pain points?
that's it. That's it. Yeah.
And how can we build on and address those?
Just something in the chat there we might just have a look at there from Anna there. Do change managers need to be particularly resilient as change can be difficult? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Look, I agree. Change is hard, right? I think you go into it kind of knowing that, but I
Yes.
also think it's incredibly rewarding when you see the change happen, right?
Right.
And but you know, I don't think it's any harder than being a leader in a business. I mean, like dealing with people's challenges on a day-to-day basis, getting folks to do, you know, what they don't want to do uh, from time to time in any team is challenging. So, I think, you know, if you choose to have a career leading people, that's part and parcel of what you're up for. But I don't see it as being any more challenging than any other kind of people leadership role.
Okay. Very good. We'll leave it there. We're just running out of time now. So thank you everybody for attending. And a great thank you to Bronwyn for an excellent session there over the last 50 minutes or so. I'm sure you got something out of it to take away. I think for me, it really is what I see out there at the moment is that certainly project managers and change managers are getting closer and closer together. I think the way organizations are starting to run on a matrix basis, there's a lot of interconnection there. With AI now coming on stream, it really the focus for the project manager is actually more on the people side of things than the technical side. That's the way it seems to be going. And so I think we might be it might be a good idea for all of us to maybe take a look at more closely at change management for the future.